Venezuela, a country once poised to thrive on its unparalleled oil wealth, now stands as a global cautionary tale. How does a nation blessed with the largest oil reserves in the world, more than even Saudi Arabia, spiral into one of the most catastrophic economic collapses in modern history? The answers are as complex as they are tragic, rooted in decades of mismanagement, corruption, and missed opportunities. But what happened to this land of boundless potential? And more importantly, can it ever recover? At its peak, Venezuela wasn't just rich. It was one of the wealthiest countries in the world, a petrogiant whose economy thrived on the black gold beneath its soil. Yet today, its streets are lined with desperation, its population fleeing by the millions, and its government in shambles. This transformation didn't happen overnight. It's the story of a nation that squandered its greatest gift and became a stark reminder of how unchecked greed and short-sighted governance can destroy even the most resource-rich economies. In this video, we'll uncover the layers of this economic disaster, the rise, the fall, and the ongoing struggles. But there's more to this tale than just oil. It's a story of power struggles, international sanctions, and the devastating human cost of mismanagement. If you enjoy thought-provoking insights like these, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Economy Explorer. Trust me, you won't want to miss a second of this journey. The discovery of wealth beneath the surface. In the early 20th century, Venezuela transformed from an overlooked South American country into an economic marvel almost overnight. It wasn't through manufacturing or agriculture, but through the discovery of vast oil reserves hidden beneath its soil. By the 1920s, oil production exploded, positioning Venezuela as the second largest oil producer globally, trailing only the United States. The newfound wealth brought sweeping changes: modern infrastructure, bustling cities, and a thriving middle class. For a time, it seemed Venezuela was destined for greatness. But was this wealth a blessing or a curse? From rags to riches, the oil boom. During the mid-20th century, Venezuela's economy surged as oil became its golden ticket to global recognition. By 1950, the country enjoyed one of the highest per capita incomes in the world, surpassing nations like France and Germany. Oil exports dominated, accounting for over 90% of national revenues. The government reaped immense benefits with policies that directed a significant portion of oil profits into public programs. Roads, schools, and hospitals sprang up, symbolizing a nation on the rise. But even as the bolivar soared in value, cracks began to form. The country's dependence on oil meant its fate was tied to volatile global markets. Could this reliance sustain Venezuela's meteoric rise, or was it sowing the seeds of instability? Joining the Global Oil Club. In 1960, Venezuela cemented its status as a global oil power by co-founding the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, alongside Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, and Kuwait. This strategic alliance gave member countries unprecedented control over oil production and pricing, ensuring steady revenue streams. For Venezuela, OPEC membership marked its entry into elite economic circles. The nation leveraged this power to further its global influence and domestic prosperity. Yet, with great power comes great responsibility. As oil money poured in, other sectors of the economy began to wither, a phenomenon known as Dutch disease. What happens to a country when its economic diversity shrinks to a single resource? A nation's identity built on oil. Oil wasn't just Venezuela's primary export, it became the backbone of its identity. The wealth generated fostered a culture of consumption and dependence, as both the government and its citizens grew accustomed to high living standards without diversification. By the 1970s, Venezuela nationalized its oil industry, placing immense faith in Petróleos de Venezuela S.A., PDVSA, to maintain its economic dominance. For a while, it worked. However, as the world has seen time and again, overconfidence can be a dangerous companion. How long could Venezuela's economy rely on oil as its sole lifeline before the cracks widened into chasms? Stay tuned as we dive into how the very success of this golden era set the stage for Venezuela's eventual collapse. The warning signs were there. Did anyone pay attention? The first cracks: overspending and oil dependence. Venezuela's oil wealth was like a bottomless treasure chest. At least, that's what its leaders believed. Flush with cash during the oil booms of the 1970s and early 2000s, the government embarked on massive social spending programs designed to win the hearts of its people. Subsidized housing, free education, and cheap gasoline became symbols of national pride. However, this generosity came at a steep cost. The economy became dangerously dependent on oil, with little thought given to saving for a rainy day or diversifying revenue streams. When global oil prices plunged in 2014, the treasure chest slammed shut. Public coffers emptied, and the government scrambled to maintain its grip on power. Could this downfall have been avoided with better planning, or was it inevitable? The price of corruption: billions lost. What happens when a nation's wealth becomes a feeding ground for the corrupt? In Venezuela, billions of dollars vanished into the pockets of government officials and their allies. From embezzlement schemes to inflated contracts, corruption seeped into every corner of the economy. For instance, Petróleos de Venezuela S.A., PDVSA, once the pride of the nation, became a hotbed of financial misconduct. Funds intended for public infrastructure and welfare programs were siphoned off, leaving citizens to bear the brunt of failing schools, crumbling hospitals, and food shortages. While corruption isn't unique to Venezuela, the scale and brazenness of it were staggering. How could the government justify such betrayal while its people starved? The mismanagement of opportunity. Even as the oil boom fueled prosperity, economic mismanagement laid the groundwork for collapse. One of the most glaring examples was the government's decision to fix currency exchange rates. What seemed like a strategy to stabilize the bolivar quickly spiraled into chaos, creating a thriving black market and crippling legitimate businesses. Meanwhile, price controls imposed on basic goods backfired spectacularly, as producers could no longer afford to operate. Supermarket shelves emptied and hyperinflation skyrocketed, rendering the currency almost worthless. For everyday Venezuelans, life became a daily struggle for survival, with wages unable to keep pace with soaring costs. Could the leadership have course-corrected, or were they too entrenched in their failing policies? The cost of loyalty: a hollow workforce. In 2002, an oil workers' strike crippled the nation, but instead of negotiating, the government retaliated. Thousands of experienced employees were replaced with loyalists who lacked the technical expertise to manage the industry. This decision proved catastrophic for PDVSA as production levels plummeted. Without skilled professionals, the country's golden goose, the oil sector, began to falter. Meanwhile, brain drain swept through Venezuela as millions of educated citizens fled the country in search of stability. What happens when a country loses both its resources and its talent? For Venezuela, it marked the beginning of the end. The story of Venezuela's collapse is far from over. As we move forward, we'll explore the international factors that compounded this domestic disaster and the devastating human toll it continues to exact. Stay with us. This is only the beginning of the unraveling. Sanctions and isolation. A nation cut off. When the United States imposed its first sanctions on Venezuela in 2005, it was a targeted move aimed at specific individuals and entities accused of corruption and human rights abuses. Over time, however, these sanctions expanded, eventually targeting Venezuela's lifeblood, the oil industry. By 2019, the U.S. had implemented sweeping measures that effectively barred the nation from selling oil in the international market. For a country whose economy depended on oil for over 90% of its revenue, this was a devastating blow. But sanctions weren't just economic, they were symbolic. They isolated Venezuela from global financial systems, cutting off its access to foreign capital. Was this economic pressure a necessary tactic to encourage political reform, or did it unfairly punish the Venezuelan people? Hyperinflation and economic collapse. What happens when money becomes meaningless? Between 2013 and 2018, Venezuela's inflation rate skyrocketed to unimaginable levels, peaking at over 130,000%. This hyperinflation wasn't just a statistic, it was a daily nightmare for millions of Venezuelans. A loaf of bread could cost an entire month's salary by the time someone reached the checkout counter. To cope, the government printed more money, only worsening the crisis. As inflation surged, the bolivar became worthless, forcing citizens to turn to the black market or barter for essentials. The collapse of the currency not only eroded purchasing power, but also trust in the government's ability to lead. How does a country rebuild faith when its people can't even rely on their own money? Brain drain, the exodus of talent. Over 6 million Venezuelans, nearly a fifth of the population, have fled the country in recent years, making it one of the largest migration crises in the world. Many of those leaving are highly educated professionals, doctors, engineers, and academics, seeking stability abroad. Their departure has left Venezuela with a crippling shortage of skilled workers, further hindering its ability to rebuild. This brain drain isn't just an economic problem, it's a societal one. Families are torn apart, communities lose their leaders, and hope for a brighter future grows dimmer. Could Venezuela ever entice its lost talent to return, or is this exodus a permanent scar on the nation? Internal struggles. A government on the brink. The Venezuelan government has faced mounting pressure from within as well. Political protests have erupted repeatedly, with citizens demanding better living conditions, accountability, and reform. Yet, these protests are often met with brutal crackdowns, further alienating the population. The leadership's grip on power has come at the expense of its people, with opposition leaders jailed and democratic processes eroded. Even elections, once a symbol of national pride, have devolved into international spectacles of controversy. Can a government survive when its own people and the world doubt its legitimacy? As the situation spirals further, Venezuela's external and internal pressures intertwine, creating a perfect storm of challenges. In the next section, we'll explore whether there's any realistic path to recovery, or if this nation's struggles are a harbinger of worse things to come. Lessons learned and the future. Venezuela serves as a stark reminder of how natural wealth, when mismanaged, can become a nation's downfall. Its leaders squandered oil riches on unsustainable programs and short-term political gains, ignoring the need for diversification and investment in the future. Countries like Norway, on the other hand, turned similar oil wealth into lasting prosperity through disciplined policies and sovereign wealth funds, ensuring their resources benefited generations. Venezuela had the same opportunity, but chose a different path. Despite its collapse, Venezuela's vast oil reserves still hold the potential to rebuild the nation. Recovery, however, requires more than just oil. The country must eliminate corruption, restore property rights, and rebuild trust with its citizens and the global community. These changes will take time, possibly decades, but they are essential for the country to regain stability and hope for the future. Through all the chaos and hardship, Venezuelans have shown incredible resilience. Millions have endured unimaginable challenges, yet they continue to fight for a better tomorrow. Their determination is a testament to the human spirit's ability to persist, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. Thank you for being part of Economy Explorer. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the world's most fascinating economic stories. And before you go, check out one of the suggested videos on the screen to keep exploring with us. Your support means everything. See you next time.